Hello, everyone, and welcome to the second of our two semifinal matchups between two very awesome games. My name is Mike.
I'm Nick.
I'm Travis.
Hey, don't forget about me, Matt.
Yeah,
You're supposed to say you're Matt at that point, Matt. God damn.
Hey,
we had to bring the little brother on the school trip
Hey
this
guys,
time.
I'm back. Hi.
So he's tagging along just so you guys understand kind of what's happening. We're gonna keep it the same way, so it'll be the 3 votes in the end.
What about me?
Matt's kind of just here to kind of chime in with his opinion. Okay, so he's gonna have kind of an unofficial vote, but
Matt is here to sway the crowd.
Yeah, the reason we're doing that is just because we don't want it to end in a 2-2 tie. If his vote doesn't sway anything, we could count it and call it 3-1, but we just don't want to risk any 2-2. So in the event of a tie, Matt's vote won't count, unfortunately. But that's just because we want to keep it consistent.
Deathmatch.
Yeah. With that being said, the matchup we're doing today is Halo 3 and... Legend is out of the Wind
Waker. How
Almost
could you
forgot.
forget that already?
It's been a long time.
Nick, it's because it's a very forgettable game.
Yeah,
very forgettable game.
Halo 3, very popular first-person shooter. We've done enough introductions for that. Wind Waker, very awesome action-adventure game. We've already said a lot about it. Let's just jump right into this. Who wants to start?
Let's see Travis start. I don't think Travis usually starts.
I don't think I've ever started anything ever. So, I'm just not an instigator, you know? Okay, so, I have had experience with both of these games, or at least the HD remaster of the Wind Waker. So I'll start with...
Which is the easier and better version, but we're debating the original,
I know.
which has problems, Mike.
So why are you Travis!
I'm
Travis
sorry.
is trying to speak. Why are you yelling at me?
I don't know.
You'll have to defend yourself later. So I'll start with the game that I have much more experience in, and that would be Halo 3. I have probably a disgusting amount of hours into it throughout many different 360s because we always killed them. And
Terrible hardware.
Terrible hardware, and then it was also on just constantly, mostly playing Halo 3. Because there's just so much you can do with it. It has an amazing, epic campaign. And that actually has co-op, which is cool, because that's a dying art these days, isn't it? So whether it was like me and CJ hanging out on the couch playing through the entire campaign, or multiple people being in my basement having a LAN party, doing online things, there's just so much customization in what you can do, because we have had what we call Mongoose Season, where you're just on a Mongoose, drive around a giant map, and then there's like someone in the middle with a sniper, and he's trying to obviously prevent you from getting to the end. And then there's like other things that play off of the infection play mode, where it's like Convoy, where it's basically the same thing, only you're just running around a big giant map with a gravity hammer, and you're in a warthog, and you kind of team up and try to kill the alpha zombie and whatever. Or they're, just classic Slayer mode, because they're all fun, because this game has... It really just explored with like what you can do, and then like with the Forge being in it, you're actually able to make your own maps too, which really helped in those customization of like the game modes, because you can like specifically make it like available for one certain thing, like Mongoose Season, where it's just a giant circle. And then there's Wind Waker, where it's obviously a set story. It's only campaign, single player. And you have cool dungeons and things, I guess.
You have terrible dungeons, in my personal opinion. But hey, I'm not going to talk about that yet. How about this? Let's talk about the changes between because both of these games have been kind of released in the semi-middle of when their franchise was. Like, Wind Waker has had more iterations from the previous Legend of Zelda game. And Halo 3, obviously, you used to see numbered entries for the Halo games. So talk about for Halo, like you had the Needler that wasn't dual-wieldable, thank God. You had the assault rifle return, so you could actually rip off turrets and have them run around like a badass and just shoot everything, which was so satisfying. So I believe the gravity hammer came back then, and I think the Spartan laser as well.
Yep.
But you had new items and new vehicles, and you had a lot of new things that came. You had both returning things and new things that came into Halo 3 when you compare them to the previous games of Halo 1 and Halo 2. And also the audio, like the soundtracks for both of these games we mentioned before, and I'm just going to touch on now. They're pretty much perfect. They're really damn good. Wind Waker, in terms of how it's changed since the previous ones, one of the biggest ones, and it's a very big graphic overhaul from before of the hyper-realism graphics that they were trying to do before. You had the original Legend of Zelda game and like the Adventures of Link that featured 2D sprites, and getting up to the point, you had kind of a rough patch. I'm going to call it a rough patch because it is easily disagreed upon between people with the 3D Zelda entries. And Wind Waker kind of abandoned that for a console generation, saying we're going to focus on this art style where I'm not sure if they intended for it at the time, but it kind of looks more timeless, where you actually see not hyper-realistic graphics, you see cel-shaded graphics. And you see the impact that had because you see games like Breath of the Wild and I guess Skyward Sword to an extent kind of still follow in those footsteps to show that graphical fidelity come from the earlier games into Wind Waker. So in terms of what these games have both done, they've both iterated on their previous version of previous games better and better and better up to that point with and again, you guys know my personal bias for this one. I personally think that Ocarina of Time is a better game than Wind Waker, obviously because I voted for it, but you gotta admit that in terms of controls, making things feel tight, and having new and exciting updates to the game, both of those have gotten up to this point, which is why these games are at this point in the bracket. My whole issue is that, and I do want to hear Mike's comments on this. Do you feel, and I feel like we talked about this a lot, do you feel like the fact, and this is just me playing devil's advocate, which is something Mike usually does, which, crazy, right? Is, do you feel that Wind Waker can go toe-to-toe with Halo because of the fact that Wind Waker is more limited in terms of the ways that you can enjoy the game? Wind Waker only has single player, but Halo 3 has so much more. You can do multiplayer in both the campaign mode and the Forge mode. And like you can do so much more multiplayer and single player in Halo 3. Do you feel like that weakens Wind Waker when comparing these games?
Yes and no. Funny, this whole time I'm kind of leaning towards Halo 3 in my head. So I was preparing this argument for if Halo 3 did go on, but I guess it works here too, because I was almost going to say the opposite, right? Both these games are so well loved. If Halo 3 only had a campaign, would it have been as well received as Zelda was, considering it only has a campaign? And what I mean by that is Wind Waker didn't need all the multiplayer and stuff to become a hit classic. Did Halo 3 need online multiplayer? If Halo 3 didn't have that, would it have been a classic?
One of the complaints that they would have in terms of Halo 3 is there were complaints about the campaign being too short. So it's a good, it's a good question to pose.
Right, but obviously they also put some of the development into having the multiplayer stuff. So I'm sure if they didn't have multiplayer in mind, they would have had a little lengthier campaign. But and my point isn't to say that, because of that Halo 3 is lower down. I guess what I'm trying to say is I don't think it's fair to knock Wind Waker for a lack of variety if Halo 3 has more variety, but as a result, the modes in it are not as well planned out, I guess you could say, as Wind Waker's. Wind Waker put a lot of care into the campaign because it's all it had. Wind Waker's campaign, I think, is clearly better and more fleshed out than Halo 3's because Halo 3's was short. The gameplay in it's very consistent, in terms of what you're doing. So, obviously, Wind Waker's campaign, I think, wins in that regard. But I think Wind Waker's campaign wins because Halo 3 was focused on more variety. So I think if we're going to knock Wind Waker for the lack of variety, we have to knock Halo 3 for a lack of extensiveness in each of its modes. Because I would even say with the multiplayer modes, I mean, they're fantastic. There are a lot of games out there that have different types of multiplayer modes that have more than just deathmatch, that have things like capture the flag.
But not to the extent that Halo 3 did, though. That's the main thing. Multiplayer was the best part of the Halo 3, obviously. But you're saying that, yes, I agree with you. Wind Waker probably had more resources developed into their single player story, which is fine. But you're talking other games have great multiplayer. I don't not to the extent that Halo 3 had. First of all, obviously split screen is dying and whatnot. You had ranked and custom maps, but again, the Forge and Theater mode were just such huge innovative things that they put in there. It allowed the player to actually see parts of the map replayed from any angle, and that was revolutionary. It wasn't just a single perspective of seeing from a first-person shooter thing, and you could share all of this with people with your creation just through the file sharing that they had. You can say that Wind Waker had a fantastic single-player story, which it does, but I still think you can't just say that Halo 3's multiplayer, other games have had great multiplayer. Halo 3's was exceptional. It wasn't just good, it was outstanding.
Yeah, I think but there's still one caveat there, right? And the only reason I'm bringing this up is because we're at the ends.
Yeah, we gotta get
the issue that I have with it is it really hinges on one thing, and that's customization. I think the success of Halo 3's multiplayer, and I feel weird saying this, it's not 100% because of the developers. The developers essentially left it open so that the gamers can make it a lot better, right? I think the fun of it is that, like you said, you have these modes where you can customize and make maps however you want to. Similar to what Mario Maker does. I think for me, then, does that make it a better game because gamers went in and made it awesome? You know what I mean? Like, customization is awesome, but does that make it a better game because the developer sat back and said, let's let the gamers decide how this game is going to turn out? I think that's kind of the fence that I'm on there, is that because outside of that, it's not that different from other multiplayer games. I don't know too much about theater mode, so I don't know the extent of it, but there's a lot of multiplayer games that have allowed you to kind of, with the camera, look across the whole scope.
But
as far as I know,
at that point, though, at that time, it wasn't like that.
I don't know. There's a lot of Xbox 360 games that I feel like did, and I don't know which came first, but I know a lot of them came around the same year. So, I mean, to me, a mode where you can like zoom the camera, look around the map, to me isn't innovative. I feel like there's tons of Call of Duty games that have done that. There's tons of other FPS games that I've also done similar things. So, to me, that's not extensive enough to say this sets it apart, that you can use a camera to look around the map. Customization does, but then I also think customization doesn't make it that much better. I don't know.
My whole thing is that all this stuff built Halo 3 into a bigger community. And yes, the community was 100% backing this game and was able to improve upon it, like, from there. But when all this stuff and being able to connect with everybody, and you can argue that it could be limitations of the GameCube and the fact that they weren't able to, that didn't have internet connection. But what Halo 3 was able to do is really build a community, and a game that's united in that front would only want to make their game even better and better and better. So I don't think you can. My personal opinion is I don't want to knock them on the fact that they just made the game better by making creative game modes that other people wanted to try, especially if the developers left the door open for that possibility. And I think that's one of the reasons why Mario Maker was so popular too, is because it was basically an open door of, hey, we're going to give you a easy tool to create these options. I mean, we're talking about a lot of things. I still want to touch on other things that Wind Waker had, but that's one of the reasons why I feel like Halo 3 is such a strong candidate, and definitely a really strong candidate to win this whole damn bracket. It's not just that it had a great single player story. It's not just that it had a great single player story. It's not that it just had a great multiplayer. It's that it was the complete package of everything that we've been trying to quantify on what makes a game great. The developers hit their goal. It had a great backing. It delivered on every single front. It had amazing customization options. It made it feel like your playthrough was still unique to you, and you could share the experience with so many other people through a co-op mode. The main complaint that I've been trying to find for people is that it's like, the campaign might be too short, or it's like maybe it's because the community was so involved in the actual game that just kept making it better. It could be a couple of those things, but in terms of the complete package of a game and what you can consider possibly being our best game, which we kept vague for a reason, Halo 3 is hitting a lot of the right notes.
It is. I think the only thing I would say, and like I said, we're at the semifinals, so if I sound extreme, I'm not trying to say Halo 3 is a bad game or Wind Waker is a bad game. They're both legendary games. Just keep that in mind before I make this point. The community thing, to me, it doesn't mean anything. It's extremely easy to make a community. Call of Duty Infinite War made a community. Red Dead Redemption 2's online has a community, and Red Dead Redemption 2's online is awful. If you have online multiplayer, you're going to have a pretty solid community, especially if you're a popular franchise. Halo 3 didn't make Halo popular. It was already popular beforehand. Halo already had an established community, so if you have online multiplayer, you're going to have a community with it. Minecraft has an extremely strong community. Roblox has an extremely strong community. And the list kind of goes on and on. On the flip side of that, there are legendary titles like the new God of War that came out on PlayStation 4 doesn't have as extensive of a community only because it's a single-player game. So you can't compare the community aspect. Of course, Halo 3 is going to have a bigger community.
Wind Waker does have a community.
Right, which I think honestly speaks volumes about it, because why would single-player games need a community for?
Well, I would argue that a lot of the communities that are built around it is more, again, I agree with you on the terms of just the game and like the legacy that the game series has, but also the fact that one of these games can be speedrun, and I think that also attracts a different audience. So it doesn't necessarily have that multiplayer aspect of it, but it still has other ways that you're engaging other people through the game, and the way to do so is through the internet. And so that's what the speedrun communities are doing with the Zelda games. It's the same way with Ocarina of Time. Ocarina of Time is one of the most popular speedrun games ever. Like, the game got down to, I think, like almost sub 17 minutes recently, which is ridiculous for that game. But it's because everybody is always challenging themselves on whatever stupid percent that they can think of, or any meme category. There's one that I was watching of Majora's Mask on trying to complete the Bomber's Notebook as fast as possible. It was one of the stupidest speedruns I've ever seen, and it was so damn entertaining. I loved every second of it. But they're constantly competing in that, and you got to have some kind of interactivity with other people to really build that community. And I don't know, like that. I haven't thought that much through on this point. But one thing I do want to also highlight Halo 3 before, hopefully shifting gears more towards Wind Waker, is that Halo 3 was also able to hide the limitations of the 360 console very, very well. It looked and sounded way better than you would initially think, and it was also great that, again, the campaign could be completed with 4 people and 2 people. I didn't get to say that yet. Those are a couple other things that I jotted down. But in terms of pushing the console too, I think Halo 3 also did that well. But if you have anything else to say, I do want to shift to Wind Waker, because we do got to give it a lot of the spotlight. There
is one other thing I do want to say, and this is more Travis and maybe even Matt, because I'm no FPS expert. We knocked Call of Duty Modern Warfare out in the first round, and granted that's because it had a really tough first matchup. But
Wind Waker.
Yeah, how ironic, huh? Modern Warfare was a classic game. Everything Nick just said about Halo 3 can easily be applied to Modern Warfare. It pushed the limitations of the Xbox 360. There's a variety of ways to play it. It has extensive and amazing online. Not only that, it has that special Spec Ops mode where you can co-op with people and face off in different missions. And so I guess what I would ask is, how come we knocked Modern Warfare out so early and really didn't give it much of a chance, and we're saying Halo 3 can potentially push all the way to the end? Is it just because of the customization aspect of it, or is there something else that I'm kind of missing here?
Well, for the Call of Duty, do you remember if it was Call of Duty 4 or was it Modern Warfare 2?
It was 4, Modern Warfare.
Yeah, because that one did not have the Spec Ops, I don't think, in Call of Duty 4.
It had something, I remember. It had some game mode, because I remember
it had old school mode, which was glitchy as hell, because it was literally like the first rendition of it where you can like get guns, kind of like how you find guns in the Halo maps, and then you can use them then. But because that was like their first idea with it before just making the classes, like, it was literally Glitch City if you ever went into old school mode. That's all me and my friends did if we went in it. And then the campaign has... I mean, I personally love Call of Duty 4. But, like, because there wasn't really any customization. You can, like, change the score limit or time limit or whatever.
Right.
But other than that, it's kind of like... I mean... The guns barely even feel different, honestly. Like, a machine gun will feel like a machine gun. Whereas, like...
It feels more unique.
Yeah, because, like, Halo's guns
also... the fact that Halo 3 did come out before.
Yeah, because, like, Halo 3's guns feel more unique and stuff, too. Like, the energy sword and gravity hammer. Like, you can... even though they're both melee weapons, you can feel the distinct difference between them. There's the difference between a needler and the assault rifle. They both... are rapid fire guns, but the needler explodes and it's awesome.
Also, Halo 3 was released on September 25th, 2007. I just want to put this in here for facts. Call of Duty Modern Warfare, November 5th, 2007.
And then...
So Halo 3 was also first.
Yeah. So, like... and then me, I personally like the Halo 3 campaign story better. But, like, both of them fall short in that they are pretty short campaigns. But again, they're also more focused on the online multiplayer aspect of it anyway. So I think the reason why Halo 3 can kind of survive a little longer is they did like a little more innovative thinking with like how the first-person shooter works, but it wasn't so crazy. Like now, like they have freaking jetpacks and it's all the Call of Duty garbage that they also added. Like Halo kind of also went that route. So I don't know, like it felt futuristic, but like nothing was too disgusting OP, because even the Needler, like it had a really limited amount of ammo you can use, so you couldn't just spam it. And then thank God they got rid of the duel from Halo 2 because that was broken as hell. But like I think because this was like a first-person shooter that allowed for the community to kind of actually get involved, where most other first-person shooters don't really. There's like, okay, here's the map. Like, this will be your sniper map. Whereas Halo's like, okay, we'll let some, like, we'll obviously have, you know, well-designed maps for ourselves. Like, if they didn't put Forge mode in it, I wouldn't have cared. It would have had enough for me to like it anyway. But I think the fact that the developers, like, had the community in mind makes it, like, it's cool that they actually are like, okay, let's see what kind of maps some people would like to see, and, like, maybe we can also design maps from that anyway. Unfortunately, they went into a dark, scary route after Halo 3, but...
That's actually a good point that Travis mentioned. It wasn't just the fact that there was a community for the game, because when we talked about communities can exist for any kind of game that's out there. It's the fact that they were involved in it, and it felt like you had more of a stake in it. You had more of an input in that, and I think that was one of the biggest things, because it's not just the fact that you can create your own map. It's the fact that, like, Rooster Teeth had a map that became like a staple map that people loved playing. That's what it was the fact that we were like, it wasn't just the fact that there's a community for the game and talking about what they love about it. It's the fact that you were part of the community and you were involved in the actual game that you loved. It had more of that interactivity, and that's, in my mind, I know you don't really care about the community level, Mike, but I think that gives you more of involvement in the game and a deeper appreciation for the game because you have such a stake in it. And I think that does matter.
Okay. Do we want to go on to Wind Waker then?
Yeah, sorry, we talked about Halo 3 a lot, but another thing that I want to mention about Wind Waker is the fact that I'm going to address this again, and I know that I might be beating a dead horse here, but the original Wind Waker had a really bad problem with pacing. And I talked to Travis when he was up here, and he knows a lot more about this, and I'm going to keep it concise. At the very end of the game, it becomes very, very bad out with padding. It reminds me of Skyward Sword on how bad that ending was with the padding that it did. I know it wasn't what they intended to do, and how they fixed it in Wind Waker HD was way better, but the rupee grinding, the whole tedious process, the entire time, all of it combined into one of the, I would argue, one of the worst end games I've ever seen from a Zelda game. And it had a lot of great things going for it. I know I say that I don't like the dungeons. The dungeons are still good. They're not bad dungeons by any means. I think they're weaker Zelda dungeons in my personal opinion. But the pacing did hurt when it got to the end of Wind Waker. And that takes you out of the experience.
No, I agree. I think that's what makes this tough for me to compare the two games then, I guess, because you're right.
The pacing was good before that. Like, the pacing was almost perfect before that, but they never... Yeah, sorry. I wanted to say, I don't hate the pacing of the game overall. Like, it was really good until the end.
Yeah. Well, I guess that's the issue, because I guess I'm a bit confused on how to compare the two, because one of the things that I just thought about, and I don't want to go back on a Halo 3 rant again, but the issue with this comparison is Wind Waker, like you said, has some flaws, but overall its campaign is pretty fine. Pacing can be an issue, and there's some issues. I still think the campaign is better than Halo 3's, because Halo 3 has the opposite issue. It has a short campaign. The story in Halo 3 is phenomenal, and I think in a long, drawn-out campaign, it could have been really emotional and telling. It was still emotional being as short as it was. So I think if Halo 3 had a longer and more drawn-out campaign, it could have been one of the greatest campaigns ever made in any video game, period. Obviously, they focus on multiplayer, so I'm not going to knock them for that necessarily. So we could sit there and knock on Wind Waker's campaign, but I feel like it's almost a moot point because its campaign is going to be better because Halo 3 was rushed, right? It has a shorter campaign. And I think the flip side thing that I was thinking about, too, is...
Wind Waker was also rushed.
Yeah, but I mean, in terms of it didn't feel rushed playing it, is what I mean.
I'll personally disagree, but yeah, go on.
So I guess the issue that I'm having now is that the audiences that we're talking about are completely different. For Wind Waker, we're focusing on a single-player audience. All this community stuff we've talked about with Halo 3 hinges on whether or not you have good online connection. At the time that Halo 3 came out, that wasn't as much of a guarantee. Me and myself and a lot of friends kind of struggled finding a lot of good online opportunities, and that kind of throws out the Forge mode itself.
Well,
so
why?
Wind Waker.
Because like I never had online until I actually got like the Xbox One anyway.
Right.
Like I had online, but like you can download the maps and then you can just play in multiplayer mode, split screen, like on your TV itself.
Right. I guess what I mean more is just the whole online aspect of it, like playing against other people online. And I mean, if you have internet to download the maps, then that's good too. I guess what I know
what you're saying though, Mike. I agree with you on the point where a stable internet connection shouldn't be necessary for a game to be like a full, complete package in your mind. I understand your point.
Right. And I guess the only reason I'm bringing this up, and I guess this is, we're coming out and saying it, if we're comparing these two games based on everything they have, Halo 3 blows Wind Waker out of the water, in my opinion. There's no contest to be made there at all. Halo 3
in a
offers...
complete package game, yeah.
Yeah, Halo 3 offers way more than it does. I know we said we weren't going to discuss the soundtrack because they're about even. I don't think they're even. I think Halo 3's soundtrack does way more for the game than Wind Waker's does. Halo 3 has a slow, rushed campaign, but I think part of the reason it's so emotional is because of the soundtrack. I mean, the second you turn it on, all of a sudden you feel like you're getting into this amazing campaign-riddled game. The music makes that campaign what it is, I think. So I feel like if we're just going to compare these games based on everything they have, Wind Waker doesn't stand a chance. The good thing about Wind Waker is it is significantly more accessible. It's a game that's rated E. It's on. It's all offline, and so you don't have to worry about
the SRB argument, Travis.
Well, I'm just saying, like, I feel like it's open to a lot more people.
Yeah, no, you're right. You're right.
This is what killed Danganronpa.
Right. So I guess the question is, and because we're already reaching sort of the end of this, if we don't care about that accessibility aspect, for all intents and purposes, I don't think there's any more reason to discuss this, because then Halo 3 is going to get all of our votes. The only way Wind Waker wins is if that accessibility and online argument holds up. Because outside of that, Wind Waker doesn't stand a chance, I don't think. I don't think it's even close.
Me personally, when it comes down to accessibility, and we've had comments about this, so I'll do a little bit better of explaining what I'm talking about in accessibility at this point. I'm not talking about just, I guess in this case, I want to mention more of the pick up and play aspect of the game. I know, Mike, you're talking about the accessibility of more audiences can enjoy it just based on like age restriction and whatnot. But for me personally, I think I'm also thinking of the accessibility in terms of the ability of just being able to play this with people almost seamlessly, where it's you put a controller in their hand and they can play. And honestly, I don't know if I can give the edge to either of them, though. In terms of accessibility, in terms of like being able for a broader audience, absolutely, I think that does matter. And Wind Waker, I think, would get the point there. But in terms of picking up and playing, I was like, again, you know me and how almost archaic first-person shooters are to me at one point. I was able multiple times in high school, if I went over to a friend's house, to get a controller in my hand and just play almost instinctively. It's a game that yes, it does have a big learning curve, but I would say a pretty decent skill floor where almost anybody can enjoy the game from by just picking up a controller and playing. And in terms of accessibility there, I might want to give it to Halo 3 because of the fact that it just seems so natural to play a game like that, especially with friends. And that's one of the hard things that it is to compare. Accessibility, right. You're right. Wind Waker will definitely win in terms of attracting a broader audience and whatnot. But in terms of just putting a controller in their hand and letting them play, I still think that in terms of Zelda, like for people's first Zelda experience, that is a little tougher because like the A button doesn't jump. It's hard for people to get used to that. Like in terms of navigating certain menus, Wind Waker did it better. Ocarina of Time's had problems with that, but I still think that Wind Waker does struggle, and I mean it's way better than other ones, but it took me a long time as a kid when I was trying to play Zelda for the first time just to figure out the controls. Halo's, it's simpler, but it's just you just shoot things. You pick up a weapon and shoot things. I think Halo 3, there's a little bit nicer of a. It's kind of nice to have that kind of simplicity.
Right. So I guess then at this point, I think we all know where this is going to end up. We're 30 minutes in. I don't think there's anything left to debate. Do we just want to vote?
All right, Travis, you ready to pull out the victory? Sonic Boom, baby, let's go.
Sonic Boom.
Winners finals.
I told you, comeback story.
I mean, I can vote first. I think we know how the voting is all going to end up. I think, for all intents and purposes, I was trying to see if there's any level that these games are similar on, or something that Wind Waker can win, and I do think Wind Waker wins the campaign. But in looking through this, Wind Waker doesn't win in anything else. I don't think that speaks to Wind Waker being a bad game. I think that speaks to Halo 3 being a legendary game. It's a top 5 game ever made, for sure. I don't think there's a contest here. I was hoping that maybe there'd be some fun debate point we can have to make this an actual heated conversation, but there really was nothing. I feel like the whole way through, we all kind of agreed Halo 3 dominates in every way. It has so much more to offer to a player. I don't know. Halo 3 is going to win this round for me.
Yeah, I'm going to have to keep my vote the same. Sonic Boom, it's done so damn much. I mean, it was on the best console in the world, the Wii U. The villain was this cool dragon guy.
And
all
like the
graphics were
polishedness of that game.
Oh,
what was his name?
It was polished to hell. Knuckles could fly. I forgot about that.
He can.
If you don't patch it out, Knuckles can freaking fly. No, Halo 3.
Hey, wait.
But...
Shh, Matt, what's your vote?
What's that?
Is he still even here?
What happened? Oh, I'm part of this?
Never mind.
Oh, yeah.
Matt, what do you think what game do you think wins? Halo 3 or Wind Waker?
Well, I mean, like as a complete game overall, I mean, wouldn't you have to go with the game with like the most options? Because I feel like, although like Wind Waker is it's like one of the the best games ever,
Yes.
but Halo, the franchise itself, it's on another tier. Like you can't compete with that. Plus, the whole concept of customization was kind of revolutionary to the gamer's aspect. So I think I'll go with Halo 3.
There you go. Halo 3 sweeps it all, baby.
Halo 3 didn't sweep. I voted for Sonic Boom.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, but
Fuck off,
man.
we don't care about your
The
opinion.
underdog story.
So that leaves us with the grand finale of Halo 3 versus Persona 5.
This is gonna
that's
hurt.
That's gonna be a very fun one to do, and I'm extremely excited to see how that turns out. As always, let us know if we made the right decision in the comment section below. We all seem in agreement, but this is a Nintendo channel, so I know there's some bias out there. So let us know what you would have voted for. Let us know your thoughts on this. We will see you in the next video.
Bye.
Bye.
3, 2, 1, stop.